Welcome to Expert Views on ADR EVA, a podcast about simplifying the traditional African method of settling disputes or the appropriate dispute resolution ADR in a bid to attract more users to settle their disputes or conflicts with mediation, ombuds, collaborative law, arbitration, restorative justice, early dispute resolution, negotiation, conciliation, and of course, early neutral evaluation. My name is DrChinweEgbunike, the host of Expert Views on ADR EVA video podcast show and a steering group member of the International Family Mediation Project, IFMP. I'm delighted to welcome Professor Hodson to the EVA show. He is the co-chair of the International Family Mediation Project and a dual qualified English and Australian Solicitor, Mediator, Arbitrator, and a part-time family court judge. He is also an author and has received the OBE for services to international family law. He is a special counsel and co-founder with his wife, Anne Thompson, of the International Family Law Group, LLP. He wears many hats, so I've left the link to his profile. Welcome to the show, Prof. Let me start sharing my slides now. It's such an honor to have you.
Delighted to take part. I'm really keen supporter of mediation. I've been a mediator for about 25 years, keen to support it in any way I can, and I'm delighted to be with you on your channel.
Oh, thank you so very much. So without further ado, the first question is, what is the role of family mediation in conflict resolution? Thank you.
Well, conflict resolution obviously is very wide. Conflicts occur in all sorts of walks of life around the world, international, national, family, community, neighborhood, and everything. But wherever there's a dispute, most people would like to avoid the ultimate conflict, a real big dispute, an animosity, and find a way to resolve. And there are plenty of ways to resolve, negotiation, conciliation. And one of these that has developed over the last 30 years or so, which although it's been around in many forms for a long time, is family mediation. Within the family arena, whether that is parents, whether that is the couple themselves, whether it is financial issues, etc. Within the family dispute arena, mediation has come to the fore in the last 30 years as a way of resolving a dispute. It's certainly not the only way. There are plenty of others: arbitration, negotiation, collaborative law, early neutral evaluation, lots of ways. But many would say mediation is one of the primary ways. And the benefit of mediation is it's not just the couple themselves negotiating as parents or spouses or whatever, civil partners, cohabitants. It's not their lawyers negotiating, each party sort of sending their lawyer into the negotiating room, as it were, do your best, get the best deal. Yeah. It's somebody who is a neutral person, has got no skin in the game, whatever that ghastly phrase means. They've got no involvement. They are literally neutral. They would not have normally have had any dealings with the couple before this. And they will use their skills, their trained skills. In most countries around the world, mediation is a profession which has a period of training, can be quite extensive. In England, it's at least a week, with experience of training, having had experience under a supervisor. And they will see the couple as a neutral person to help them settle. It's the settlement of the couple concerned, the parents or whatever. It's not the mediator's settlement. The mediator can't give legal advice. The mediator can give legal information, and the mediator uses all their skills to try and find a way forward. Mediation, certainly in England and many English-speaking countries, came from America, and it came from the therapeutic profession. Many initial mediators, I'm now going back into the late 80s, early 90s, were therapists, counsellors. And mediation still has some of those elements behind it. And mediation started as a way of finding common ground, a traditional therapeutic way of finding where are you together rather than where you are apart. And that became the traditional form of mediation. But as the years went by, we found that that was valuable and remains hugely valuable. But there are different ways of mediating, and now we would find more of what we call the directive mediation, where more of a steer will be given, still not legal advice from the mediator, but more of a steer will be given for the couples who find it difficult to resolve a matter on their own, even with the help of a mediator. And so what's wonderful in the last 5-10 years is that lots of models of family mediation have worked, and they work in different cultures. What works in one culture may not work in another. What works in one situation of a family may not work in another. And part of the skill of the lawyer and of other people is recommending the appropriate model of mediation. The mediator at the beginning says, what sort of model should I be adopting for this family? I've said more than enough, but that's the background. And almost all countries in the world now in their family justice system would have a strongly encouraged, or sometimes more, element towards going into family mediation. And we can come on to that in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you so very much, Prof. I would want you to sort of simplify what cohabitants is. I teach family law, so I know what it means. But some jurisdictions, some of those things are not really popular there. So yeah,
very happy. Almost all countries, there's only a couple, but almost all countries in the world give a right to a married couple to divorce, and that would give an entitlement to financial claims and sorting out matters regarding the children. Some countries in the world have civil partnerships, registered partnerships, where people choose not to marry for religious, non-religious, or all sorts of reasons choose not to marry. Yeah. Some countries give identical rights to marriage, some give slightly different rights. Then there are all others, and in many countries, more some than others, where they are simply living together. They haven't got any registered arrangement, marriage, civil partnership, etc. And some countries will give identical rights as if they were married, and some countries will give almost none. And I'm afraid there are countries which will give absolutely none. And so the position of the cohabitants might be quite different, as if they were married or as if they were not married. A number of countries would say if it's a parenting dispute, it simply doesn't matter the nature of the relationship, married or not married, may only affect financial arrangements. So it's crucially important. What is the position? And one of the key elements of mediation is that often one shouldn't go into a mediation without having taken legal advice. What is my position? What are my rights? What is my entitlement? And knowing that, I will then go into mediation to mediate with my spouse or the parent of my child, etc. Knowing my rights, knowing my position, knowing what I could give up or what I choose to give up, what I choose to compromise, what I choose to say, this is the strength of my case, etc. And so mediation works best in most situations hand in hand with initial legal advice and then advice at the end when hopefully a settlement has been reached.
Thank you so very much, Prof. So what I hear you say, that family mediation entails settlement of disputes between families, basically between cohabitants or married couples, and of course, children would be involved in some cases, and in most cases.
Well, there's a distinctive form of mediation called child-inclusive mediation.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Child wouldn't, in almost all circumstances, the child wouldn't be in the mediation room with the couple and the mediator. Yeah. But where parenting matters are concerned, it's crucial to hear the voice of the child, subject to their ability to express it, their knowledge, awareness of what decisions are being taken. And there is a model of mediation where a separate mediator, not the mediator dealing with the dispute, but a separate mediator is brought in. They've got special training in dealing with children, and they would see the child. And they would listen to the child, talk to the child in age-appropriate language, etc., and then come into the mediation room almost as the representative of the child and say, I've seen the child, and the child thinks the following. And so this what's known as child-inclusive mediation can be hugely, hugely valuable, because sometimes the parents both think they know what the child thinks, and hey, the child may think something completely different to both parents. And that's and it's an amazing experience in many ways to be in that mediation room and to hear the voice of the child through the child inclusive mediator, and for the parents to say, hey, really was the first time we really heard an independent voice of the child, particularly at a time of parental dispute. The voice of the child can get lost.
Thank you so very much. Just a quick question. Is there any particular age that
No, it really depends. You can never say it's a child of 14 or 12 or 8. I think the age is getting lower. Initially, it was 12. There's no cut-off point.
11?
It depends on their age, awareness, and understanding. And for some children, that will be 12. But hey, for some children, it will be 8. And for some, it might be less so. Even a child of 5 or 6 may want to have a view. And I think it's important to look at the sort of decisions that are being taken. The most obvious is, with whom will the child spend most time? Monday to Friday, Saturday to Sunday, or Monday, etc. That's the obvious parenting, etc. But there may be what child will the child go to, a school which the child will go to. But sometimes there is the big decision of where the parents will live. And this is what we call relocation applications, where at the time of separation, one parent, and there are millions, literally millions upon millions around the globe in this situation, international families, where they may have come from 2 countries and are now living in a 3rd country, or one may have moved from their country to live in another country with with the other parent. At the time of separation or subsequently, one parent wants to then go and live in another country for work, for a relationship, for life choice. And they say, I'd like to move. I'd like to take the child with me. Maybe the child is living primarily with them, whatever expression one wants to use. And as you know, they are some of the most difficult cases that family law has to deal with. A child moving from London to Brisbane or London to Jamaica or wherever, with the other parent not seeing the child. Now, they are classic cases for sorting out in mediation, because you can sort out the finances, you can sort out the wider issues. People get a chance to have their say, which won't necessarily be the say they get a chance to say in the courtroom. And these are, the child's got a say there, and the child will want to say, well, actually, I don't want to live in that country, or yes, I do want to live in that country. And the child of 6 or 7 may have their own view on that topic. Maybe not so sophisticated, but hey, maybe it's got to be taken into account. So crucially important.
So how do you handle that? What I mean is, how do you integrate the various methods or models of mediation when settling such complex disputes?
Well, partly if they're in different countries, as may well be the case. For example, you may have a child abduction where one parent has, without the consent of the other parent, taken the child across national borders. That's a child abduction. And child abduction works well in mediation. Well, they won't be in the same country. And so how would one do with that? Well, obviously, as we are doing this by Zoom, a video of one form, do you have one mediator in one country and another mediator in another country sort of sitting alongside? So if I was a mediator, one party would be next to me here, and where you are, the other party would be next to you. We don't represent the person who's near us, but we're actually able to do the talking together. So would it be a joint mediation model like that? Would it be another form of mediation where you move between rooms if you are all in the same place and there's an anxiety, and we'll come on to domestic violence and things like that, where there's an anxiety about power imbalance, things like that. Sometimes it can be advantage. Somebody might say, I'm a bit anxious about being in the same room as the other parent, etc. So you're in the same building but in separate rooms, and the mediator goes between, what's called shuttle mediation. Or you might have lawyers actually involved in the process. Again, a different variation. It all depends on what suits best this particular family.
Okay, so how about can you combine facilitative, therapeutic, and evaluative? Can you combine the facilitative method of settling disputes or evaluative when settling such disputes?
Absolutely combine them all together. Sometimes it would be the more therapeutic form of mediation. Sometimes in children disputes, you find common bridges. What can we agree between ourselves as parents, and then you build on from there. And so that might well be still an appropriate approach to adopt. But then there is, particularly in financial disputes, a greater directional element, a greater steer, where the mediators say, well, you've got these assets.
Yeah.
Do you know how you might be able to resolve the dispute? It might be selling the house. It might be selling the house in years to come. It might be transferring the house to one person with a lump sum paid back. All the more, and most ordinary people, normal people, if I may say that, don't naturally think of all the ways to resolve a dispute. And one of the key attributes of a good mediator is to know, how could a dispute like this be settled? Their experience as a mediator, perhaps as a lawyer, also doing the work, the family law, to know these are the half a dozen ways I might resolve a dispute like this. And hey, all 6 of them may be equally good and fair. But one of them may be more attractive to the couple than the other 5. And so, hey, let's explore all of them. And that's the wonder of mediation.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for highlighting that. So you mentioned domestic violence. So it's important to ask you, because in several articles and scholars have pointed out that domestic violence should not be mediated. And some of them have argued for domestic violence to be mediated. So what is your take on that?
I think what is interesting is that mediation thrives on very careful screening. It's far more prevalent than other forms of alternative dispute resolution. Screening is fundamental and crucial. Particularly so in the face-to-face, but not only so in the face-to-face meeting. If there has been domestic violence, should one always say no to mediation? Views will change and differ. I would say it's possible, but only if one person is comfortable and confident to do so. If they're not, then what else can we do? Well, one of the other ways we may be able to do it is by having what I call shuttle mediation, where they are in the room with other people, protective or giving them confidence or comfort to help them. And so they don't actually come face to face. That's one way in which to deal with it. It's a pretty scary place as a mediator to be in the mediation room and you've got 2 people going hammer and tongs. Again, I'm not sure if it's an expression that transcends the cultures, but you've got 2 people who are really going, who really feel strongly and emotionally. And this again is a different element. In the courtroom, there's a discouragement about showing emotion. There's a discouragement about expressing yourself. The barrister will often say, I ask you, Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, please stick to the facts. And then, in the mediation room, it's good to a certain extent to let it out, to express the feeling. Because you then say, well, you've heard how your spouse or the parent of your child has said, how do you feel about that? We become existentialists, as it were, because an opportunity exists. Of course, we keep control in as far as that is possible. Where it's not possible, there are other mechanisms. Maybe we bring it to an end, or sometimes as a mediator, I said, like, time out. We're going to take 5 minutes out, etc. Things are sort of bubbling up. And so you'll simply take 5 minutes out. And, you need to have a spare waiting room, etc. Or you may say, well, hey guys, why don't you just go for a walk around the block? I suggest you go separate blocks, as it were. Don't meet up, but separate or whatever. But there are ways. Back to the essential one. I would suggest that until one has had very good screening from an experienced mediator and has had a one-to-one in advance before the mediation session starts, one shouldn't. That's crucial. So therefore have that. But having done that session, sometimes, absolutely not always, sometimes it might be possible and appropriate. Safeguards put in, protections put in, etc. So I'm not of the school that says no, you don't ever. but I certainly would say be ultra cautious and do your screening well in advance on a one-to-one.
Oh, thank you so very much. And I like the fact that you also reviewed the advantages and disadvantages associated with litigation while comparing it to mediation. So that's awesome. And I also want to ask about the implications on legally binding post-nuptial and prenuptial agreements, because in some jurisdictions, this again is not popular. So if you could, if you don't mind enlightening
of course,
my audience, thank you.
This is one of the major chasms around the world. There are some countries where marital agreements, relationship agreements, could be between cohabitants, civil partners, doesn't matter, relationship agreements are binding. You can't get out of it, even though it may be a really rough deal, or maybe fair when you got together in the relationship 20 years ago, but it's jolly well not fair now. There are some countries where you simply are stuck within it. There are some countries, particularly in the continental European model, where they won't have independent legal advice. They'll have one lawyer give them joint advice, which we in England find a bit scary and a bit worrying. And so they will be completely binding even without independent legal advice. There are other countries where they will be binding, but there are strong preconditions. They will be a significant level of disclosure. They will certainly be independent legal advice. Sometimes they will be at least 28 days before the relationship, for it's a premarital agreement, more than 28 days, etc. There'll have to be an absence of fraud or misrepresentation, etc. So in those circumstances, yes, again, it would be binding. And then there are those countries, and England is one of them, where it's not binding. But we've had a series of cases, primarily the Supreme Court in a case called Radmacher about 10 years or so ago, where it said they will be persuasively binding. And so if the parties have had, or they've had the opportunity of legal advice and disclosure, and it comes within a broad range of what is fair, then the court will uphold it. Are they bound by it? No. We call it what's called persuasively evidential. In England, we would say as long as it provides for the needs. So if you get a settlement which says, well, we're not going to share our marital assets, well, that's fine. But as long as the needs are provided for. But we are a very needs-based jurisdiction. Not other countries are like that. So those are the three categories.
Okay, so what do you think? So is it actually advisable for couples to think about putting the clause or making the agreement, since it's not really binding in some jurisdictions?
I think it's a very cultural question. For those brought up in a culture of premarital agreements where the expectation is that there will be one, well, of course, why not? For those in cultures where it is almost completely alien, then it's a bit of a shock. I think because we are now more global and more international, we watch telly programs and films where people talk about sort of signing the document, as it were, the prenup. I think there's a greater awareness of their benefits. There are certain groups of people where they are strongly encouraged to do so. Where there is a lot of private wealth, certain groups of individuals, maybe the entertainment industry, sports industry, where they're more likely to have their own private advisors, they will be recommended often to do so. Where they are in, this is a sad thing to say, areas of life where there's a higher divorce rate than others, again, they're more likely to. For most people not in a culture of premarital agreements, mostly won't do so. But even for those in that culture where they've got independent legal advisors or financial advisors who look after their wealth, they will often be recommended to do so. I think for an international family where they may be moving between countries, I would strongly recommend not entering into one, but taking legal advice to consider whether to enter into one. They may find themselves, if sadly the relationship doesn't continue, living at that time in a country where they are binding. Or they may find they're in a country where they're not binding and they expected they would be. So I would say to all couples, before they move to work abroad, find out what is the country you're going to and what are some of these cultural elements, such as marital agreements.
Well, thank you so very much. So I would want you to sort of expand on what the International Family Mediation Project is all about. Thank you.
Delighted to do so, and thank you for all your work you've done in that respect. There are associations of people working with families around the world. There's the International Bar Association, has been around decades, brings together lawyers working in all the countries around the world. In family law, there's the International Association of Family Lawyers, been going now about 35 years or so. I've been a member, I think, about 30 years, and they are the world's leading lawyers dealing with international families. There is the Academy of Collaborative Professionals, lawyers doing collaborative family law. We have nothing involving mediation. If you need to find a mediator in Jamaica or in New York or in South Africa or Brisbane or London, it would be jolly hard to do so. To find somebody experienced in working with international families, almost impossible. We have no common documents. We don't even understand how we work in different countries. How could I recommend a client of mine who may be in Bordeaux in France, but with English connections, to start mediation in Bordeaux if I don't know how they do French mediation in France? And so about 4 or 5 years ago, we'd been discussing this for a number of times. Roisin and O'Shea and I, an leading Irish mediator, she and I got together and said, we've really got to do something to create an international family mediation profession, to be able to find out who are the people in each country who are best able to look after international families, best able to mediate, best able to the experience, as you and I have just been saying, about the various difficult issues that apply for international families. And so we created an organization called the International Family Mediation Project, created a website, which I think you've got, or I can certainly send over, you've got it. And we have started with a steering group and a number of working parties to produce documents, to produce guidance, to produce a code of practice. We have already produced an agreement to mediate, because we found that the agreement to mediate document was different all around the world. And so we've taken the best of all the world's agreements to mediate, and we produced it at one omnibus version. And we've just floated it out there to the global community and said, hey guys, this is what we think will work. Use it if you want. We're not precious. We've got no copyright within it. Let us know how you get on and we will improve it. The next working group is working on a code of practice. What should be the code of practice for how we would work with an international family as distinct from a purely national family, all within this country, all the same laws, etc. What do we do? There are some real tensions, some real difficulties, but real opportunities at the same time. Another group is looking, as we've been discussing during these last few minutes, on how we work. What are the different methods of working? How can we best work for an international family as distinct from a national family? To a certain extent, many of it's the same, but some of it isn't. How can we work with that? We've already talked about domestic violence screening. What do we do about screening for an international family where, by and large, they may not be in the same country? Do we soft pedal it, or are there distinctive issues? How do we deal with the IT aspects of it? What do we do about the mediation document that comes out if they settle the case? Is it open, or is it, as we lawyers call, privileged? So we've got about half a dozen projects underway with working parties. If anyone wants to join our working parties, get in touch with me, because we're always looking for people from around the world, from different cultures, from different justice systems, from different experiences of working with families, to find out what's best, what works, how can we work better, and then as a service provide it to the worldwide mediation community and say, hey guys, this is what we've done, we think this will help you. If it encourages more international families to do mediation, we've succeeded.
Oh, thank you so very much, Prof, for all the work you've done and for your contribution to the field. And I have one more question, just a quick one. What is your advice for people pursuing a career in family mediation? Thank you.
Yes, that's a difficult one. It's because there are different routes into becoming a family mediator. One obvious route is as a lawyer. And many, certainly not all, but many mediators are experienced family lawyers. I'm a solicitor, mediator, arbitrator, and a part-time family court judge. So I bring the skills I've got in different areas to mediation, and my being a mediator undoubtedly makes me a better family court judge. That's my experience, how I do it. Yeah. So one of them is undoubtedly being a good family lawyer, quite a few years experienced, 5-7 years I'd say as a minimum, understanding how it works, understanding the sort of outcomes, etc. But certainly not all. There are many mediators who come from a social work background, from a therapeutic background. Maybe they've worked distinctly with children, child therapists, child psychologists, who work distinctively in the children environment. And there are others who are financial advisors, and then they say, right, I'm only going to do financial mediation. I'm not going to do the children issues. And so it's a different background. We can learn from each other. I'm always learning from non-lawyer mediators how they do it. They've got their skills they've learned in another walk of life they bring into the mediation room as I do. And so one's learning, and I'm a better mediator having worked alongside what's called the joint mediation model. One of the original models was you had a lawyer mediator and a non-lawyer mediator working together. It's less frequent now simply because it's a more expensive model. You've got two instead of one, so you're paying for two, etc. But it's got huge advantages, and in certain circumstances it's far more beneficial. But I think it doesn't matter to a certain extent what model it is. What matters is finding a way to settle without having expensive court proceedings. It's rarely beneficial for anyone, but in the family context, where particularly if they're children and they've got to continue to co-parent for years, decades to come, they don't stop being children when they hit 18, etc. If they've got co-parenting for years to come, many people live in a fairly small environment. It may be an international environment, but it's a fairly small environment, and they're going to have to meet each other. They're going to see each other in years to come at various social events, whatever. Resolve these matters. Don't let the courts have to resolve it. Maybe start proceedings, but having done so, go into mediation to find a good mediator, because experience continually around the world is that cases settled by negotiation, mediation, have a greater stickability. They're more likely to be complied with, they're more likely to be adhered to, they're more likely to be respected. People say, that's my settlement, it wasn't imposed on me by a judge or a lawyer. And that gives a huge, greater importance to it. And at the end of the day, it creates a respect and integrity. It encourages more ongoing communication. And that's crucial, whatever the background of the dispute.
Oh, thank you so very much for this masterclass. I appreciate your perspectives, your insights, and the learning you shared with us today. And I believe that from what you have stated herein, particularly about the advantages associated with mediation, and precisely family mediation, the potential users, of course, would embrace what you have stated and opt for it whenever the need arises. And thank you so very much for coming.
If anyone's got any questions, email me, and I can't say I can guarantee an answer, but if I can in any way, happy to do so.
No worries. I'm going to leave your email address on the YouTube.
dh@davidhodson.com.
Yeah, so I'm going to put it down, write it down on the description, and then, so they can get in touch. And also the website, our website for International Family Mediation Project, just in case anyone wants to join. So,
please
all right, thank you so very much.
Okay, all the best.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
You too.